Some brands are legendary. In every category, someone sets the standard, and some companies create raving fans. Join Scott Wozniak and Caitlin Johnson of Swaz Consulting as we dig into the tactics and tools behind great organizations. How did the legends do it? And how can you become a legendary brand too? Well, Caitlin, I am excited to dive into kind of a counterintuitive example this time. So, in our engine, when we talk about creating an amazing customer experience, the customer experience engine diagram, there's fuel. We've got all these gears and stuff in the middle that make these raving fans. But there's a diagram element that it's the fuel, it's pouring into the engine, and we call that customer insight. Everything we do assumes you know your customers. And we find most companies have customer data, not customer insight, right? We know facts, we know what they buy, where they're from, like some kind of behavior data, but we
That would
don't
be
know,
data. Yeah.
right, but we don't know why. Why'd they pick us? Why? What do they love? What features they love? What features don't they care about? What role do we play in their larger life goals, right? The insight, not just the activity. So there's lots of cool tools and there's fancy surveys, and you can hire us to do these deep, we come up with these really beautiful strategy decks and help people unlock like, oh, this is who your customers really are. It's lovely. And that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the thing we say all the time. It's like, man, before you put a lot of time and money into fancy stuff, there's a couple of fundamentals. There's one big one out, a fundamental that only you can do, that you can't outsource, that is so critical for customer insight. And it's what we call live observation. You
Okay.
get out of your office, go down to where the customers are actually buying and using your stuff, and like personally involve yourself in the transaction and watch them use your stuff. Like you go do live observation with your customers on a regular basis. And
What would you have people look for?
okay, lots of things like who's coming, what do they feel, what do they say, who's with them, like is his families or not? It depends on the business, right? If you get to some of the more technical spaces and things like that, you may have to go off-site. So like if you're a manufacturing company, right? You spend all your day in the plant, crank, crank, crank. Awesome. You may have to go to your customer's world and see where they use your stuff, where they install it, use the chemical, or work in their backyard. I mean, we worked with a company that was they're a maker of a whole bunch of backyard construction materials, fences and sheds and sprinkler systems. That's their specialty, is backyard kind of construction-y home stuff. And so great, your factories are efficient. Well, you go see what the backyards actually look like. See them put in the fence. See them actually, set up that new shed and see what it feels like, looks like, what their experience is like. And there's a world of insight you get that you can't get from surveys, reports, all the smartest charts and graphs in the world can't catch the nuances, feelings, and attitudes of the people on the ground.
Right. The experience.
Yes, it's so powerful and it's totally overlooked. Now, for two reasons, I think it gets overlooked. First is because what I often find is a leader who used to be really, really deeply connected to the field. They grew up doing it, right? Often this is the founder, right? Or somebody who kind of grew up in the business. I started on the front line. I was on the front desk, or man, I was in the field digging the ditches, right? And I worked my way up. Now I'm the boss. And now, I know these people. I spent the first 10 years of my career doing this work, right?
Right.
The problem is it's been 10 years since you've been on a job site and you still feel connected, but you're running on old data.
Naturally, there's a disconnect the further you distance yourself from the front line.
Yes. So what I find is the higher up you go in position and the bigger the company gets, the less naturally connected you will be. So it's like a penalty for success. Hey, your career's taken off, your company's growing, and you went from being somebody who you don't have to put effort into this, like doing your job, you're interacting with customers all the time, to, oh man, when's the last time you actually interacted with a customer personally and didn't have a report about it? And the old data will get you, or occasionally I'll see, they'll have an old customer they kept, that's their original deal, and I still work with these people, but they only have that they used to like maybe interact with 50% of their customers as a normal part of their job. And by the time they've grown
Right.
and grown and grown and they got become a leadership, you might interact with 5% of the customers, and they're all the old customers that already love you and know you.
Yeah, that probably don't have any issues or challenges, or you already know.
You think you know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't. And so you're making all
Mm-hmm.
these company decisions, assuming that your 5% or your 10-year-old data is still true. And it's mostly true, but you are missing opportunities that you
Mm-hmm.
don't know matter or don't matter because you're not actually connected. Everything is second hand. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something irreplaceable about firsthand customer experience. You got to get in the field and make the connection.
Yeah, it reminds me when I was in college, I had a hospitality minor that I was going after, and one of the classes was around leadership, and a huge topic we discussed was management by walking around.
Yes,
Yes,
classic
remember that?
term.
I
Mhm.
don't hear that anymore. And both you and I are in leadership development, and I don't hear manage by walking around as a tactic when you're leading.
Yeah, I think we've gone very high tech as a culture,
Mm.
which I personally love. Like you and I both are, we slant nerd.
Yeah,
By slant, I mean we're
absolutely.
way off the scale, extreme nerds. We're like, ooh, new tech, new toys. And
Hmm.
generally, the culture is business leaders are pro tech, and it's all about like AI and data. And listen, we've got an AI division in our company, right? We love
Yes, we
that
do.
stuff.
Hmm.
And man, it's like analog is the disregarded stepchild, like like the Harry Potter. We'll shove you in the closet and pretend you don't
Yes.
exist, right?
But
We
the potential of Harry, oh my goodness,
thank
right?
you, thank you.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
let him out of the closet and don't forget. Listen, if you want help with your AI strategy, come talk to us. We're having a blast setting those up. But
Yes.
before you do, maybe our sales team doesn't want me to say this, but like before you do any of that fancy stuff, you get in the field on a regular basis. And
Hmm.
CEOs, I'm talking to you too, executive team, like you don't get to delegate this one. You have to show up. And I would say, Caitlin, maybe you've experienced this too. It's not just personally good, especially when the top leaders do it. And it really has a cultural impact that is
Oh
a
my
lot
gosh.
of beautiful benefits for the company.
Yes, because as a senior leader, if you step out into the front line and on the field and help out here or there, just get that pulse again
Mm.
of what it feels like to support the direct client. All of the other employees and associates look at you and you're like, wow, we're on the same level now for just a second.
Right,
And
right.
then you think about the connections and conversation you can have and tell me, what am I missing since I'm working on other aspects of the business? How is the customer service going today? What are you finding are the top challenges or the top wins? Even just asking those questions are extremely insightful
Yes.
because those folks work with the direct customer day in and day out.
Mm. Mm.
So it's interesting. I'm thinking real quick about technology because I do think, there used to be this huge push for management by walking around. And then there's technology because we talk about pulse surveys
Yes,
and,
yes.
and getting insights, customer insights in that way, which is one element. But today we're really hyper focusing on the live observations
Yeah,
and
it's
getting
not
out there.
it's not either or. We're very pro
Hmm.
tech.
Hmm.
It's both. Like you need lots of little surveys and charts and graphs and customer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you show up and have a conversation. And like all live stuff, right? You don't overreact to an anecdote, right? You have one
Hmm.
customer moment. It's not like that lady was mad, so we're dropping the whole program and like slow down. It's just good to know there was she might not be your ideal customer, and it's
Hmm.
okay.
Good
Um,
point. Hmm.
but but there's still something about the emotional side. Let me give you an example of cool things that people have found doing some of this stuff. So there was so I worked with some of the leaders at Procter and Gamble, and they told me about
Hmm.
Tide, and they talked about Tide the powder, the kind of
Okay. The laundry detergent
detergent. If
powder.
you're not in the U.S.,
Hmm.
don't have this brand. It's a laundry soap that you put in to wash your clothes in a laundry machine. And what they had was they would ask, how's this working? And the people would say, oh, it's great. Like, we love the product. We got no problems. They're like, what can we do to improve it? Nothing, no extra steps. This thing's perfect. And they went and they found a significant number of the people doing laundry would dump it in, get it started, and then they would put their hand in and swish it around a little bit.
Oh,
And they
yeah.
would, wash and dry their hand off and move on to the next thing. And they had reported no concerns, love the product. And they're like, nobody verbally said, hey, we feel like we need to swish this around. But
Right.
why are, not all, but a meaningful minority, why are these people swishing the product around? And the leaders had to come, like, see this, interact, like, somebody find out what's up with that. That's weird. And they're like, oh, well, because it's a powder, I got to make sure the powder gets spread throughout so it doesn't clump. And then, it evenly soaps everywhere and I don't have a clump of soap. Well, old, like, 20, 30 years ago, that was a problem with the powder, but they had fixed it. And they told everybody they fixed it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It still didn't feel good. So,
old habits.
They created the Tide liquid format.
Oh,
it costs a little
yeah.
more, but people don't feel like they have to swish that around because liquid naturally flows around.
Sure.
And the Tide liquid became their hottest selling detergent.
Well, that's pretty cool. A completely different product was discovered as a result.
And the customer didn't know to tell you that. You watch them do it. It's the old famous Henry Ford quote, right? Where he says, if I would have asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
Right.
So if you don't know, Henry Ford kind of popularized the automobile. It had been, but he made the mass produced version that allowed it to be cheap and made it kind of huge everywhere. So yeah, back then, right? They didn't know they needed a car. They're just like, I need faster transportation. Customers are good at describing frustrations. They're terrible at describing solutions. They don't have your expertise. They don't know how to come up with a good example. So you can half ignore all the answers they say about how to fix it, but you should really listen on what they get excited about and what they get frustrated about. And that kind of stuff gets lost in a survey. Again, we're pro survey, right? You were just
absolutely. Absolutely. You get so many insights from surveys.
Yeah. And get your staff out of their headquarters and get them into the field.
Yes. Which reminds me of when I worked at Marriott International and the Ritz-Carlton. So I started my career. I mentioned earlier in this podcast, I have a minor in hospitality. Absolutely loved it. I also went to school in Orlando. So it was like tourist hospitality central, right? Yeah.
Orlando is the number one vacation destination in the world.
Yes.
People come there for vacation. So yeah, it's hospitality Mecca. It's everything.
Yes. And I just loved what I was learning. And so I ended up getting one of my first jobs out of college, or while I was still getting my master's degree, I was working at the front desk at a Marriott at, part-time hours and things along those lines. So I started on the front line. And as I progressed 15 years within the company, I ended up working at their headquarters remotely. And I was focusing on operational excellence, learning and development, and execution. And we had an amazing leader. I was probably in that role for about 3 or 4 years. And one of the leaders had said, okay, what I would like for everybody who works underneath me to do at headquarters, I want you to once a quarter go to a hotel and work in some sort of capacity. And at first I thought, oh gosh, this is very inconvenient because now I need to leave my day job and figure out, how to get out in the field. And not to mention, I've already done this, right? I already put in my work at the front desk, right? Like I'm at headquarters.
Yeah.
That's different.
I did all this to get off the front desk, right?
Yes.
The fancy work now.
Right. Exactly. But we were hearing from our field associates that sometimes the processes and systems that headquarters creates is a disconnect from what it's like to actually work in the hotel with guests in your face, customer facing. And so when you think about, I'm in operational excellence and I'm trying to help leaders diagnose their root cause issues, get their understanding of their customer insights in order to understand how to be a better, more effective and efficient hotel. whatever systems I create need to be simple, because the day job of these hotel leaders is to take care of their customers, not to sit behind a computer screen and manage systems and processes.
Right.
And so it really was enlightening to get back on property in a different mindset of, because my customer at that point are the associates.
Right.
How can I make the systems of running a hotel simple so the associates can do that and therefore take care of our customers? And so it just reminded me, when I'm creating job aids, my 1, 2, 3, 4, very simple language, put it with a picture, just make it easy, 30 seconds or less. How can I explain this element of a process so that a hotel leader can figure it out, go get it done, and get on with their day? So while I felt like it was an inconvenient ask at the time, it was so insightful to be back on property, see what the associates deal with, how busy they are taking care of the guests, and then to remember anything I create is for them and to make their job easier so that they can take better care of the guests.
Yeah, this is a fundamental. A lot of great I'm not surprised, right? Chick-fil-A borrowed a lot of these ideas and has their own version of this too, right? Similar deal. Like, I don't care that you're a fancy, corporate strategy guy, I'm a corporate lawyer, right? Good job. Every one of us had to work in the restaurant at least one day a year, go pick a restaurant. They had a whole little setup to go find a restaurant, partner with them. And that includes in fact, the higher up you go and the more field focused your work is, like strategy for the field. Some of these guys spent 3 to 4 days a year in the restaurants. And man, the executive team spent 30+% of their time in the field. Now, they weren't like working a shift 30% of the time, but they would go meet operators or their franchisees, or they call them operators. They would go meet them on location in their space. They would go out to visit other competitors, not read a report about competitors, go eat at another competitor. They would spend as much of their time in the field and out of the headquarters. And one of the sayings they say there is like, hey, there's no cash registers at the headquarters. We don't make any money sitting in our pretty offices coming up with cool strategies. Like, the actual action and the brand is actually happening down there. So if we don't get out of this thing, drive down the road and go over there, we don't actually know what's going on. And and man, this is from the Kathy family that owns Chick-fil-A and their executive team. They grew up in the restaurant. I mean, Truett founded it from his kids, literally second gen, that they grew up literally working in the restaurant. That's how they would hang out with dad some years. They couldn't get more connected in the early years. They could easily have been like, nobody gets the restaurant business like us. This is our baby. I personally came up with all these menu items. I wiped all those tables for 20 years. I'm done wiping tables. And I'll tell you 2 little things that came out of that. One is just the inside of the staff, like connecting. And the other is the way the leadership team could model their values in a way that no speech in the world could do. I'll give you one thing that Truett was famous for, and it trickled down to the whole executive team, his kids. I do it now. He picked up trash. Truett would not walk past, or would not walk past, a piece of trash. And not like if he was forced to. He would veer out of his way, pick up, I mean, we're talking cigarette butts on the ground. He's going to pick it up. Now, you go wash his hands, but like, of course, if there's, so in fact, Dan Cathy, his son, who's chairman now, he's retired CEO, Andrew, his son's president, but Dan was the president when I showed up. Truett was chairman back in the day. Dan would visit a restaurant, and before he would go inside, he would take a lap around the building and pick up trash.
Oh, I love that.
Walk through the drive-thru, pick up cigarette butts, anything he could find, just little dumb things. And then he would go in, throw the trash away, wash his hands, and then start his visit. He didn't give any speeches about it. He never preached to us about humility or service or how the details mattered. Yeah, sometimes over here we'd have operational excellence talks and he'd talk about excellence in the details, but he never told any of us to pick up trash, not once. Truett was still around. I traveled with Truett when I was there. Truett never once told people you should pick up trash. And I'm telling you, by the time I finished my first full year working for him, I can't walk past trash anymore. It's Caitlin, can I confess? It's kind of annoying. It's like, I'm carrying a briefcase. I'm going through the airport. I do not running late for my flight. I do not want to stop and pick up that piece of trash. And I can't get 2 steps past it when I feel like the Kathy Chick-fil-A pressure, and I'm like, son of a trash, and I'm picking it up and running to the bathroom.
I'm laughing because I can connect to that, not from necessarily like picking up trash, but whenever I'm in a restroom and, like there's always the splash of the water around the sink. I can't help it, but I wash my hands, I dry my hands, and then I take my paper towel and I'm like, okay, I got to clean up my mess. And that's the hospitality part of me. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like there's restroom attendants, they will do it. But to me, I'm like, no, I gotta take care of my section here.
I tell you the impact on the culture is profound. And I know that's not a unique thing. It's funny. I actually worked with another restaurant chain in Colombia, South America. And their founder, I worked with him directly. He's passed now, sadly, but he also was famous. And they mostly were malls because Colombia has these big epic malls, kind of like we used to back in the 80s, 90s. That's still the main jam for them. They do a little bit outdoor, but 90% of shopping's in these beautiful malls. So they have these big, beautiful restaurants inside the mall. And they have a shared like food court area. He would go clean the food court. Now, it's literally not even his restaurant. Like the mall, the way that it works, right? That officially the restaurant, your lease line stops at the edge of your counter. You're not responsible for the tables. There's mall workers and staff who are responsible for those tables. There's no table assigned to your restaurant, right? You're one of like 15 restaurants pointing at these generic tables. And he would go wipe down tables and pick up trash. This super wealthy, super successful, even famous within his country, like politicians would stop him. He was a big dog, right? And the impact of seeing the leader wipe down tables and chat up guests before he walked in the back to do a visit in the restaurant. I personally saw him do this. You cannot management system, fancy data. There's no technology that can get you an effect like you showing up, asking him some basic questions, modeling whatever values you model, right? If you're competitive, hey, show up and ask who's winning, right? You don't have to be the trash sweeper. That happen to be those 2 guys' values, but something that says, if this matters, you learn and your team learns, man, before you get all this other fancy stuff and then sit in your ivory tower collecting fancier charts.
Right.
Down out into the streets where the people use your stuff and just once a year, 4 times
observe.
A year, just get out there.
Just observe.
And it could unlock really powerful things for you and your company. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to sign up for our weekly newsletter. It's all new content with the same themes. You can subscribe for free and learn more about how we partner with our clients to build legendary companies at swozconsulting.com. That's www.swozconsulting.com. And if you want to get access to the actual tools and techniques that we use with our elite consulting clients, check out our online program at legendarybrandsacademy.com. That's www.legendarybrandsacademy.com. Greatness is possible. You just have to build the right engine.